I raised my grandson for 8 years. Then his mother came back, and the court allowed her to take him from me. If you want to know how this happened, get comfortable. I'll tell you everything. I'm 76, and I lost the boy I raised because my daughter finally remembered she was his mother. She dropped him on my porch like an unwanted package, vanished into finding herself, then came back years later with crocodile tears and legal papers. I fought her. I lost. And when she took him away, I didn't just lose my grandson. I lost the only piece of my late wife still breathing in this world. My name is Walter Haynes, 76. Hands that shake in the mornings, knees that complain on stairs, and a heart that's been patched so many times it feels like a quilt someone keeps ripping apart. People think old men like me spend our days feeding birds and watching game shows. Truth is, I spend my days listening to the house. Not the TV, not the radio, the house. It creaks in the same places it always has. The kitchen floorboard by the sink. The stair rail that groans if you lean too hard. The back door that never quite seals in winter. But the loudest sound is what isn't there anymore. A child's footsteps. A laugh that bounces off the hallway like it belongs there. A voice calling, "Grandpa, watch this." Sometimes I still answer without thinking. And that's how you know grief doesn't fade. It just learns your schedule. The day my daughter visited. If you've ever had someone you love hand you a problem and call it a gift, you'll understand what happened the first time my daughter, Marlene, showed up with her son. I hadn't seen her in months. Not since the funeral for my wife, Ruth, my Ruth, who died after a short, vicious battle with cancer. The kind that doesn't care if you're good people or not. The kind that eats the light out of your home and leaves shadows behind. Marlene arrived in a car I didn't recognize, music thudding through the windows like the car had a heartbeat and it was angry. She walked up the path wearing sunglasses big enough to hide in, and she didn't take them off when she hugged me. She didn't hug me like a daughter hugs her father, either. She hugged me like someone checking a box. Then she opened the back door and unbuckled a little boy. He looked about 4, maybe 5. Brown curls. A face so much like Ruth's that my throat closed up so fast I thought I'd choke right there on my own porch. He had a little backpack with dinosaurs on it. One strap was twisted, the way kids do when they put things on in a hurry. "Hi," he said, like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to speak. I crouched down, slowly, because my joints were already old then, and I asked him his name. He said, "Eli." And my daughter said, like she was ordering a coffee, "I need you to watch him for a while." A while. That phrase has ruined people's lives. I looked at her. Really looked. She was thinner than I remembered, and her smile didn't reach anywhere near her eyes. She smelled like perfume and cigarettes, like 2 different people fought over her and both lost. "How long is a while?" I asked. She sighed like I was being difficult. "Dad, don't do this. I have stuff going on. I can't do the mom thing right now. He'll be better here. You've got the house. You're home all day." I remember my hands tightening around the porch railing. "My wife is barely in the ground," I said. "And you're talking about the mom thing like it's a shift at a job." Her mouth tightened. She looked away, toward the street, like my grief was inconvenient scenery. "I need a break," she said. "I'm young. I didn't ask for this." I wanted to scream. Neither did he. But Eli was standing there, staring at his shoes, trying not to cry like he'd already learned crying made adults angry. So I swallowed my rage and made my voice gentle. "Come inside," I said to him. "You hungry?" His head snapped up like I'd offered him treasure. "Yeah," he whispered. And my daughter, my only child, let out a relieved breath like she'd successfully dropped off a burden. She handed me a plastic grocery bag. Inside, a couple shirts, a pair of pajamas, and a stuffed dog missing one eye. Then she kissed Eli on the top of his head without even bending her knees. "Be good," she told him. Not, "I love you." Not, "I'll be back soon." Just, "Be good." Then she got back in her car and drove off. And that was it. The first night, Eli wet the bed. He woke up shaking, face wet with tears, whispering apologies so fast he couldn't breathe. He kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," like he thought I'd throw him out. I held him, awkwardly at first, because I was a man who'd raised one child a lifetime ago, and my wife had always been the soft one. But my arms remembered. I said, hey, it's okay. Beds can be washed. You can't." He stared at me like he didn't understand being treated like a human. Then he cried against my chest until my shirt was soaked, and I sat there in the dark, holding him, feeling something sharp and strange inside me. Not just sadness. Purpose. Ruth had always told me, love is what you do when it isn't convenient. So I did, raising a boy on grief and pancakes. At first I thought Marlene really meant a while. A month, maybe. 2. She called twice the first week. Both times, she sounded like she was at a party. Music in the background. People laughing. Is he fine? She asked. Does he miss you? I asked back. Silence. Then, I'll call again. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into a year. Eli started calling me Grandpa on the 3rd day. It slipped out while I was pouring him cereal. He said, Grandpa, can I have the one with the marshmallows? Then his eyes got wide, like he'd said something forbidden. I just nodded. Sure. He looked relieved in a way that broke me clean in half. He started kindergarten with a lunchbox I packed and a name tag I stuck on his shirt. He had trouble with nap time because the teachers said he'd flinch if someone touched his shoulder. He'd wake up angry sometimes, fists clenched, like he'd been fighting in his sleep. I learned his nightmares weren't monsters. They were abandonment. And abandonment isn't something you can talk through with a 5-year-old. It's something you undo one steady day at a time. So I did. I made routines like they were sacred. Saturday pancakes. Sunday library. Homework at the kitchen table. I learned what Minecraft was and pretended I wasn't impressed by the little block houses he built just to see him grin like the sun. I learned to braid hair when his school did a crazy hair day and he wanted a cool look. Even though he was a boy and some of the other kids teased him. He didn't care. He said it made him look like a warrior. Ruth would have laughed until she cried. And in a way, I felt her everywhere, especially in the small things. The way Eli hummed when he was happy. The way he folded his hands when he listened. The way he said please without being prompted. I caught myself talking to Ruth at night. She would have loved him. I'd whisper into the dark. God, Ruth. He's you. Then I'd sit in the living room after Eli fell asleep and stare at the family photo on the mantel. It used to be the 3 of us. Me, Ruth, Marlene. Now it was just me and a little boy who hadn't asked for any of this. When she came back hungry. The first time Marlene came back in person, Eli was 8. 8 years old. Old enough to understand what mother meant. Old enough to feel the ache of not having one. She showed up with a new boyfriend and nails like knives. Eli froze when he saw her, like his body remembered the damage before his mind could catch up. Look at you, she said, like he was a stranger's dog. Eli stood behind my leg. I felt something in me go cold. Why are you here? I asked. She smiled. And it was the same smile she used when she was a teenager caught sneaking out, sweet, practiced, full of excuses. I'm ready, she said. I blinked. Ready for what? She waved her hand like it was obvious. To have my son back. Eli's fingers tightened around my pant leg until I could feel them through the fabric. I said, carefully, he's not a sweater you loaned me, Marlene. Her smile fell. Don't start, she snapped. I'm his mother. I felt my heart thud hard. And I'm the one who's been here, I said. Every day, every sickness, every school meeting, every nightmare. Her boyfriend shifted, uncomfortable. Eli whispered, so quiet I barely heard it. I don't want to go. Marlene heard it, and something ugly flashed across her face. Don't be dramatic, she said to him, like he was an adult being difficult. Then she turned to me, eyes sharp. I'm taking him. Don't make this messy. Messy, like my entire life hadn't become a landfill of her choices. I told her no. That's when she stopped playing nice. 2 weeks later, I got served papers. Custody. She wanted custody of the boy she hadn't raised. Not because she suddenly found love. Because she found need. Need for child support. Need for control. Need to prove something to the people who'd started calling her what she was, a mother who ran. I got a lawyer I couldn't afford. I sold my wife's jewelry to pay the retainer. I hated myself for it until I remembered Ruth would have handed it over without hesitation. The court didn't care about my hatred or my love. The court cared about blood and paperwork. Marlene's lawyer painted me like a bitter old man stealing a child from his real mother. They said I was controlling. They said I was poisoning him against her. They said I was refusing to reunify. You want to know what I learned in that courtroom? If you tell your story with enough confidence, people will believe you. Even if the child is trembling behind his grandfather's chair. The judge gave her visitation. Then more. Then, with a few neat strokes of a pen, the judge ordered Eli to transition back to her home. Eli screamed. Not cried. Screamed. He grabbed my arm and begged me not to let them take him. "Grandpa, please," he said, voice cracking. "Please. Please." I tried to hold on to him, but the bailiff stepped in. The social worker told me to be calm, as if calm could fix anything. Eli was dragged away, sobbing so hard he gagged, and Marlene walked out with him like she'd won a prize at a carnival. I remember standing in the courthouse hallway afterward, feeling older than I'd ever felt. My hands shook so badly my lawyer had to hold my elbow. "All you can do now," he said, "is document everything. Document everything." So I did, losing him twice. Eli came back to me on weekends at first. He was quieter, jumpier. He flinched when I raised my voice even a little. He stopped humming. I noticed marks once, faint, yellowing, on his upper arm. I asked. He shrugged and said, "I bumped into stuff." Kids lie like that when the truth feels dangerous. I called Marlene. She said he was clumsy. She said I was looking for problems. Then she stopped answering. I reported concerns. The social worker made notes and told me not to assume. Then one weekend, Eli arrived with a backpack that smelled like stale smoke. He took his shoes off and immediately started cleaning the table with a paper towel without being asked. "Eli," I said gently, "you don't have to do that." He kept wiping. "If I don't, she loses her temper." I felt my stomach drop. I knelt and took the towel from his hands. He looked terrified, like I'd stolen his only armor. "It's okay here," I told him. "You're safe here." He burst into tears like he'd been holding them in for weeks. And I knew, with a clarity that tasted like blood, that she was hurting him in ways no bruise could prove. Then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Marlene cut me off completely. No visits, no calls, no updates. One day I drove to her apartment and found it empty. Gone. Eli was gone. I called every number I had. I even called the boyfriend's mother, because when you're desperate you stop caring about dignity. No one answered. For weeks, I lived like a ghost. I sat in Eli's room and stared at his bed. I kept the night light on even though no one slept there. I'd open the refrigerator and see the juice boxes I bought for him and feel something twist inside me. Every day, I checked the mailbox like a dog waiting for its owner to come home. Nothing. I'm sharing this not for shock, but because these stories often go unheard. Then, 3 months later, I got a call from a number I didn't know. It was a hospital. They asked if I was Eli's next of kin. I remember my knees giving out so suddenly I hit the kitchen floor hard enough to bruise my hip. "I'm his grandfather," I said, voice shaking. "What happened?" The nurse paused, just long enough for my soul to leave my body. "There was an accident," she said. My mouth went dry. "Is he?" "We're doing everything we can." I drove like a madman, and I shouldn't have. A man my age shouldn't be barreling down highways with his hands shaking on the wheel. But grief makes you reckless. Love makes you stupid. When I got there, I saw Marlene in the waiting room. She looked calm. Not calm like controlled. Calm like she'd already decided how this story would be told. Eli was in intensive care. He'd been struck by a car while crossing the street. That's what they said. That's what the report would later say. But what no one wrote down was how he'd been crossing alone. How he'd been out still hungry by evening, going to the corner store because Mom was sleeping. How he'd been carrying a few crumpled bills and a note with a grocery list in child handwriting. How he had been doing adult things because his mother was doing none. I sat by his bed with tubes in his arms and machines breathing for him. His face was pale, his lips cracked, his curls flattened against the pillow. I took his hand, so small, still, and I whispered every story I could think of. The pancake Saturdays. The library Sundays. The way Ruth would have fussed over him. I told him he wasn't a burden. I told him he was loved. I told him I was sorry I couldn't protect him. Marlene didn't come in much. She'd stand in the doorway sometimes, arms folded, staring like she was watching a TV show she didn't choose. At one point she said, "He's strong. He'll pull through." Her voice had the tone of someone making small talk. I wanted to rip the air from her lungs. Instead I said, "He deserved better." She rolled her eyes. And in that moment, I understood something that made my blood run cold. She didn't see him as a person. She saw him as a role. A thing that made her either look good or look bad. Eli passed away shortly after. 2 days. He didn't survive his injuries, and the nurse's face did that soft shift people do when they're about to take something from you. I remember begging. Begging like a man who'd already lost his wife had no right to beg again. But the universe isn't fair, and it never has been. When his hand went limp in mine, I felt something crack inside me so deep I thought I'd never breathe right again. You know what the worst part was? Marlene cried at the funeral. Big sobs. Dramatic. The kind of crying that makes strangers pat your shoulder. People told her, "I'm so sorry." People told her, "You're such a good mother." And I stood there, watching, feeling like I was the only one who knew the truth. My grandson was dead, and my daughter was performing grief like it was theater. The second baby. After Eli died, I thought she'd disappear again. I almost wanted her to, because every time I saw her face, I saw Eli's hospital bed. But life has a way of making cruel sequels. Less than a year later, Marlene gave birth to another child. A boy. Different father. Same careless eyes. She called me like nothing had happened. "Dad," she said, like we'd chatted yesterday. "I need help." I laughed. I actually laughed, and it sounded wrong coming out of me. "You buried your son," I said quietly. "And now you're calling me for help." "It's different," she snapped. "This time I'm trying. Trying. Like motherhood was a hobby." She lasted 6 weeks. 6. Then the social worker called me, not Marlene. They said the baby had been removed. Neglect. Unsafe home. Substances suspected. They asked if there was family willing to take him. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I stared at Ruth's photo on the mantel. And I asked out loud, "What do I do, Ruth?" Because I already knew the answer. Love is what you do when it isn't convenient. So I said yes. I took my grandson, my second grandson, home. His name was Noah. He was tiny, all ribs and wide eyes. He smelled like sour formula and fear, even at 6 weeks old, because babies know when the world isn't safe. I fed him, rocked him, changed him, learned the rhythm of his cries like it was a language. And I swore to myself, not this time. Not again. Marlene didn't fight at first. She disappeared like she always did. Then, when the court dates came, she showed up late and irritated, complaining about how unfair everyone was being. When the judge asked her if she'd completed the required programs, she shrugged. When they asked her if she had stable housing, she rolled her eyes. When they asked her if she wanted reunification, she said, "I guess." I sat there holding Noah's blanket, hands clenched, realizing the court was about to do something it should have done years ago. They terminated her parental rights. It's a phrase that sounds clean and clinical, like flipping a switch. But I watched my daughter's face when the judge said it. I watched her anger, her shock, her sudden panic. Not because she loved her child, because she lost control of the narrative. And then the judge looked at me. "Mr. Haynes," he said, "are you willing to adopt?" I felt my throat close up. I should have been excited, triumphant, relieved. Instead, I felt grief. Because adopting Noah meant admitting the truth. Eli was gone forever, and this was the only way I could make sure the cycle stopped. "Yes," I whispered. "I'm willing." So I adopted my grandson. I became a father again at an age when most men are shrinking their world, not expanding it. And Marlene did not contact us after that. Not a birthday card. Not a call. Not even a drunk voicemail at 2 a.m. It was like she'd thrown away another child and walked off the same way she did on my porch. Only this time, the court locked the door behind her. The boy who didn't want to hear her name. Noah grew up in a house full of quiet love. Not perfect love. I was tired. I was old. I made mistakes. But I showed up. Every day. He learned to ride a bike in the driveway with me jogging beside him, wheezing, pretending my lungs weren't on fire. He learned to tie his shoes sitting on the same kitchen floorboard that creaks by the sink. He learned that if he had a nightmare, someone would come. When he was old enough to ask about his mother, I told him the truth in pieces. Not cruel pieces. Honest ones. She wasn't able to be a safe parent, I said. He'd stare at his hands like he could see the story written there. "Did she love me?" he asked once, at 9 years old. I hesitated too long. And he understood the answer I didn't say. As Noah got older, the questions turned into anger. He found Eli's photo one day, my Eli, on the mantel next to Ruth. He pointed at it. "Who's that?" My chest tightened. "That was your brother." His eyes widened. "I had a brother?" I told him everything then, because hiding it felt like betrayal. I told him how Eli lived here, how I raised him, how Marlene took him, how he died. Noah's face went pale. He sat down hard on the couch and stared at the floor for a long time. Then he whispered, "Her choices led to consequences no child should face." I flinched. "Not with her hands," I said carefully, "but with her choices." Noah stood up and walked to his room and slammed the door. He didn't speak to me for 2 days. On the third day, he came out, eyes red, and said, "Don't ever talk about her like she's my mom. She's not." I nodded, because he was right. From then on, Marlene became a ghost word we didn't say. Noah grew into a teenager with sharp boundaries and a good heart. He joined the school band. He got a part-time job. He didn't drink, didn't run wild. It was like he was determined to prove he wasn't her. He adored my late wife's memory too, even though he never met her. He'd sit by Ruth's photos sometimes and talk as if she could hear him. And every time I saw it, something in me softened. This was what Ruth would have wanted. A child safe, a home steady, a future not poisoned by neglect. The phone call that changed everything again. When Noah was 17, I got a call from a hospital. Not about him, about Marlene. I remember sitting there with the phone pressed to my ear, feeling like the universe had circled back with a cruel grin. They said she was sick, very sick, an illness that didn't care about her excuses or her youth or her fun, a degenerative condition. Rapid, complicated, the kind that strips you down to your bones. They asked if there was family. I stared at Ruth's picture and felt my chest tighten. Because here's the thing people don't tell you about love. It doesn't always die when someone disappoints you. Sometimes it just turns into a heavy, ugly duty. I didn't rush to her bedside because I missed her. I went because Ruth would have gone. Because Ruth loved Marlene even when Marlene was unlovable. Because my wife, my beautiful, stubborn wife, would have said, "She's still our daughter." So I went. Marlene looked small, smaller than I remembered. Her skin had a gray cast to it. Her eyes were sunken. The woman who used to stride through life like consequences were beneath her was lying in a hospital bed with wires taped to her chest. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. Real tears. "I don't know. Dad," she whispered. "You came." I didn't answer right away. Because if I opened my mouth too fast, what came out wouldn't be help. It would be years of rage. So I just nodded. She reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold. "I messed up," she said. I stared at the ceiling. Because if I looked at her, I'd see Eli's face again. "Yes," I said quietly. "You did." She started crying harder. "I didn't know how," she said. "I didn't know how to be a mom. I was drowning. I thought you'd just fix it." I snapped, before I could stop myself. She flinched. I inhaled, forced my voice back down. "You don't get to rewrite history because you're scared now," I said. "Eli is dead. Noah grew up without you. Ruth died without seeing you make it right." Her sobs turned into wheezes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry." I stood there, feeling nothing like the forgiveness people expect in movies. Just exhaustion. "I'll help you," I said finally. "Not because you deserve it. Because your mother would have wanted me to." She looked up at me at the mention of Ruth. And for a second, she looked like my little girl again. Then it passed. Noah's answer. When I told Noah about Marlene, he didn't even let me finish. "No," he said flatly. "She's sick." I tried. He stood up, jaw tight. "I don't care." I winced. "She's still." "Don't," he cut in, eyes blazing. "Don't do that. Don't try to make me into the bigger person so you can feel like we're a normal family. Normal families don't bury their children because their mother couldn't be bothered." I felt the words like a slap. And the worst part? He wasn't wrong. "She wants to see you," I said quietly. Noah laughed, and it was a bitter sound I'd never heard from him. "Of course she does," he said. "Now that she's scared, now she wants to play mom. Where was she when I was sick? Where was she when I had nightmares? Where was she when I asked why I didn't have a mom at school events?" I had no answer. He pointed at Ruth's photo. "Grandma is the only reason you're even considering helping her. But I'm not Grandma. I don't know her anything." My throat tightened. Because Ruth was the glue. Ruth was the softness. Ruth was the voice that kept the world from turning hard. Without her, all we had left was the truth. Noah went to his room and shut the door. And in that moment, I felt something I didn't expect. Pride. Not because he was angry. Because he knew his worth. Because he refused to be used. I still helped Marlene. I brought her groceries when she was discharged. I drove her to appointments. I signed forms. I handled insurance calls that made my blood pressure spike. And every time I did, I felt Ruth beside me like a hand on my shoulder. But every time I came home, Noah would look at me like I was choosing her over him. And that hurt more than any hospital smell. The last twist of the knife. Marlene's illness progressed. She got weaker. The bravado died first. then the anger, then the ability to pretend she wasn't responsible for her own destruction. One afternoon she asked, in a voice so small I almost didn't hear it, "Do you think Eli hated me?" I stared at her for a long time. I could have lied. I could have said, "No, sweetheart, he loved you." But lies are how we got here. So I told the truth. "I think Eli wanted you," I said. "And when you didn't show up, he blamed himself. Not you." Her face crumpled. "That's worse," she whispered. "Yes," I said. She reached for my hand again. "Tell Noah I'm sorry," she begged. "Please." I swallowed. "You can tell him yourself." She shook her head, tears spilling. "He won't come." I didn't promise. Because promises have been poison in this family. But when I got home, I told Noah anyway. He listened in silence, eyes fixed on the floor. When I finished, he said, "She's sorry now because she's scared." I didn't argue. He exhaled slowly. "If I go," he said, voice tight, "it's not for her. It's for you." My chest tightened so hard I had to sit down. He didn't say, "Grandpa, I love you." He didn't have to. It was there in the way he stood in the doorway, uncertain, fighting his own anger for my sake. 2 days later, Noah came with me. We walked into Marlene's apartment, smaller than mine, cluttered with half-finished attempts at normal life. A pile of unopened mail, a sink full of dishes, a smell of stale air and loneliness. Marlene was on the couch with a blanket. When she saw Noah, her face lit up like it was Christmas morning. "Noah," she whispered. Noah didn't smile. He stood there like a stranger. Marlene started crying, reaching out a hand that shook. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry." Noah stared at her for a long time. Then he said, calm as ice, "You don't get to apologize your way out of being who you were." Marlene flinched. Noah continued, voice steady. "Eli was lost because he wasn't protected. I grew up without you. And you want me to pretend that a sorry fixes it because you're sick now." Marlene sobbed harder. "I know," she said. "I know. I don't deserve." "No," Noah said. "You don't." And then he turned to me. He looked at me, his grandfather, his father, his anchor, and his eyes softened. "But you," he said, voice cracking, "you deserved better than her too." That's when I broke. Because no one ever says that to the caregiver. People say, "You're so strong." People say, "You're amazing." But no one says, "You deserve better." I sat down and covered my face with my hands and cried like I hadn't cried since Ruth died. Noah didn't hug Marlene. He didn't forgive her. He didn't offer comfort. But he stayed for 10 minutes. He listened. He let her see his face. Then he walked out. On the way home, he didn't speak. Neither did I. And when we pulled into my driveway, he finally said, "Don't ask me again." "I won't," I whispered. "What I live with now." Marlene is still alive as I write this, but she's fading. Noah is grown now. College, work, a future Ruth would have been proud of. He visits me more than most young men visit old people. He fixes things around the house without being asked. He tells me about his day. And sometimes, when he laughs, I hear Eli in it. That's the cruel miracle of it. Eli is gone, but he's not erased. He lives in the way Noah holds a door for strangers. In the way he says please. In the way he refuses to abandon what matters. As for me, I keep 2 photos on my mantle. Ruth, smiling like she knows something the rest of us don't. And Eli, with pancake syrup on his chin, grinning like the world never heard him. Sometimes I stand there in the quiet house, and I talk to them. I tell Ruth I tried. I tell Eli I'm sorry. And I tell them both about Noah, how he grew up, how he survived, how he became the kind of person our family should have been all along. Then I turn off the lights, and I listen to the house. Because the silence isn't empty anymore. It's full of memories, full of love, full of the kind of grief that never leaves, because it's attached to something worth missing. And if you're wondering whether I regret helping Marlene now that she's sick, I don't. Not because she earned it, because Ruth did. Because love, the real kind, isn't a reward. It's a decision. But I also don't blame Noah for closing the door she abandoned. Some doors shouldn't be reopened. Some apologies come too late. And some grandfathers, like me, spend the rest of their lives holding 2 truths that don't fit together. I love my daughter, and I will never forgive what she did to my grandson.